I suppose it's just insecurity that, you know, that I don't just trust my instincts enough.
So you find that on subsequent projects, like, because we've got an X-Men page here.
Yeah, go on.
Were you doing the same sort of things? Because you were working with Grant on this, weren't you?
Yeah.
But this is I remember most of this being much more like straightforward, and it seemed like with the We 3 stuff, you took it. You went a bit more straight.
Well, yeah. Well, we 3 came after it, but with this, I had tried a bit of jiggling panels around and, you know, making things look kind of jazzy on the page. But basically, what worked best for me, and maybe it's getting back to the Akira and the Incal, you know, other movie stuff like that. Although he did actually do quite a lot of American.
Oh yeah, especially later on.
Yeah. But that kind of the Otomo stuff and like a lot of the European stuff I was looking at, it was basically, they were fairly straightforward page layouts. Everything that was happening was really happening inside the frames. It's like when you go to the cinema, the picture doesn't actually move about all over the place. It's actually the actual window you're looking at is still there in the same position. So,
but I think that's like that thing that I remember when Watchmen came out. Everybody was saying, oh, Dave said in an interview somewhere that you just forget that panel frame. If they're all the same, you really start looking at the picture, don't you? Yeah. And then when you get a big one, it's like, whoa! But it might not be a double page spread, it might only be like 6 out of your 9 panel grid. Yeah. It looks massive compared to all these little 1/9 of a page things. And it's a sort of a different way of doing it than like that image thing that maybe have a double page spread and full bleed and it's all coming out at you. Yeah. But you can have that impact in a much more subtle way, can't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is the top panel's the end of the previous scene, and the second panel downwards is at the start of a new scene. And you know, we have that frame literally just coming in from the left-hand crop. You know, as the lorry drives in with the wheels just turning, it's about to go into the open gates, which are all bashed, where we see the grounds of the school where the riot took place from the previous scene. So it's as much as possible, it's a really, really simple setup to try and tell absolutely as much story of what you've already seen as possible. And then we go to a different scene, and there's your establishing shot again, and it's Wolverine walking towards the 3 students that are about to get a bollocking.
One of the things about this that strikes me, I'll just interrupt, was it's really nice the way that gym, you know, the baseball court, it's almost like this comes out from the top, the perspective's sort of the same. Yeah. And it almost, I don't know if you thought about that, but it almost links the 2 panels, and then you come down and you've got this, you know, this big headshot that sort of stops you because it's across the whole thing. And then also there's a left-right dynamic in the 2 bottom panels. This is something I think about as well. Yeah. Where you've got, you know, sometimes visually it's nice to have a dynamic that goes with it. It gives it a bit more impact if it goes with the way you're reading, doesn't it? Yeah. So if you have a left-right movement or implied movement,
it seems to flow better. Yeah. I almost always, unless there's a really good reason for going the opposite direction, I almost always try and make the action go from left to right, just because that's the way the speak bubbles are going, that's the way your eyes naturally zigzagging across the page, and it tends to work better. I'm pretty sure, I think that it wasn't deliberate in this occasion, that the perspective was kind of similar. It was a simple case that I wanted a high establishing shot, and rather than draw the whole gymnasium, you've got the basketball court, the tennis court and the badminton court all in different coloured lines on a wooden floor. And everybody knows that.
To tell you.
Everybody's been to school, you know, and you know the setup. You use the gym hall for all the different things, so that's where you are. You don't need the whole gym hall, it's just a shorthand way of doing it. The third panel, you've got Wolverine talking, and you've got a bit of the wall bars and a couple of ropes against the wall in the background. So again, you still, you know, it's trying to give as much detail and as much feeling in this case, with as little distraction. The top panel just had to have loads of detail because we were coming back from a scene that had opened the comic.
So in this a crash car, the lorry's like got a crash car on, hasn't it?
No, it was one of the kids stuck in concrete, and the last thing you'd seen in that scene was the concrete had poured all over him, and so they had literally broken it off and put it on a flatbed truck and brought him back. So in that case, there's as much detail as possible in as simple a picture as possible. Whereas for the rest of it, there's as much detail, there's as much information as possible with as little detail. And then, of course, with the bottom two panels, you've got this left-right dynamic.
But something that was nice about the whole of this that I thought, you know, because like that top panel's sort of implied what was going on between that and the sea. One of the things that were nice about the whole run that Grant did with this, even the ones that you didn't draw, but I think you announced the ones that
the other 40 of them.
But it sort of had a nice sort of low-key kitchen sink type feel to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was really good because it wasn't that sort of bombastic superhero thing.
Yeah.
But that was part.
That was totally part of his thing. Yeah. I mean, he said to me when he asked me to you know, like do as many of the first few issues to kind of, because he wanted to change everything and he wanted me to be the artist on board with him at the start when it all changed. And he said it's really simple. He said like the Fantastic Four is basically a family, you know, and the Avengers is basically a sports team, and the X-Men's basically a soap opera set in a school. I was thinking, oh yes, you know, because I don't think of that kind of thing. And he said, you know, you've got the dynamic between all the different students. You know, it should be like Grange Hill with superpowers. That's mine. I'm actually paraphrasing. Grant will hear I've said this and say, what the fuck are you talking about? But he wanted to just take it back to this thing where it's the teachers and the kids, and there's this dynamic with amongst all these pupils of the superpowers and the dynamic between the teachers and whatnot. But yeah, it just seemed to me the most obvious thing to just do it in a normal, like the way I would do any other comic, rather than try and make it look like what I thought an X-Men comic should look like. In all the years I've worked, I've never had such a negative reaction from fans. The majority of X-Men fans just hated what we did at first.
Yeah, I remember I worked at a games company about this time, and I knew somebody and he bought X-Men comics, and he bought every X-Men comic apart from the one you drew and X-Force that Mike Allred and Pete
there you go.
And they were the ones I got. And it just sort of that thing that just separated.
Yeah, and of course I went to the Grant and I went to the Philadelphia convention, the first Wizard Philadelphia, and there was just huge fans, you know, because they had all the X-Men writers and artists at the time, you know, and we were sitting there and there was these guys coming up, you know, with like trolleys with all their X-Men stuff. They'd obviously just been buying it for years and years, and every time, like 9 out of 10 of them, like had huge bundles, and they were going along the table getting all the different creators who'd done stuff. The Kubert brothers were there, and Ian Churchill, and you know, everybody was there that had been doing the X-Men, and they were going along getting all the signatures. And I just knew all the guys at the huge big bundles, they'd been buying the X-Men all the way along because they liked that kind of comic. And then these two assholes from Vertigo turned up doing a kind of Vertigo version of the X-Men, and they just hated it.